Welcome to the night shift, where every caller has a story, every story has a mystery, and not every mystery has an explanation. You found your way to the Unexplained Hour, the late-night broadcast where we search through the shadows for the stories that were never meant to be forgotten. Every night, after the world goes quiet, we open the phone lines to those who have seen something they can't explain. Strange encounters, unexplained events, and moments that change the way they see the world. So, turn down the lights, settle in, and stay with us. Because tonight, your story could be the one that leaves everyone listening with more questions than answers. The lines are open. This is the Unexplained Hour. Our first caller of the night says they began having recurring dreams about a woman they'd never met. At first it seemed harmless, but within weeks the dreams started bleeding into real life. You're on the air. Thanks for calling in. So, tell us what happened.
Thanks for taking my call. This happened about a year ago, and I still think about it almost every day. It all started with a dream. For about 3 weeks I had the same dream every few nights. I was standing on a walking trail surrounded by trees. There was a woman standing maybe 30 feet away. She looked to be around my age, mid-20s, athletic build, dressed in black leggings and a dark workout jacket. She looked like any other person you'd pass while jogging in the park. She never smiled. She'd just look at me and say, "Please, come find me." Then I'd wake up.
Those exact words every time?
Every single time. The dreams got a little different each night, though. She'd be closer. She'd seem more desperate. Like she was trying harder to get me to understand.
Did you think someone was trying to reach you from beyond?
I don't know. I guess during that time I figured it was stress. I was having a rough few weeks at work and I like to unwind with true crime documentaries, and I figured that's what it was. But then, the really weird stuff started. I started seeing her, like actually seeing her.
What do you mean you started to see her, like in your real life?
Yeah, you could say that. It would be just for a second at a time. I'd be grabbing groceries and I'd catch someone in a black workout set turning down the next aisle. And when I'd walk over, nobody. I'd drive past a bus stop and see her standing there. By the time I looked back, she was gone. One afternoon I was leaving a coffee shop and could have sworn she walked past the window. I ran outside. Again, nothing. I thought I was losing my mind.
Did you ever get a good look at her?
Only to tell it was her.
Okay, so you started seeing her in your day-to-day life. What happened next?
So last Wednesday I went for my normal morning run. It was still early, maybe 6 o'clock. I took one of my normal routes, a trail I'd run dozens of times before. Then about halfway through, I caught this horrible smell. At first I thought it was garbage. Unfortunately, in this area there was a homeless camp a little ways off the trail, and next to it was this pile of old furniture, black trash bags, and broken wood. When I got closer, I figured out the smell was coming from under that pile. Something didn't feel right. So as I walked a little closer, that's when I saw it. A hand sticking out from underneath one of the trash bags.
Wow.
So obviously I called 911. Police showed up within minutes. I gave my statement and went home. A few days later, I saw a news story about the victim. It was her, the woman from my dreams. Same age, same athletic build, similar workout set, even the same ponytail. I had never seen her before those dreams.
That's unbelievable.
I kept telling myself it had to be some kind of coincidence. Eventually, the dream stopped. I finally started sleeping normally again. Then last night, I had another dream. It was different. This time, she wasn't far away. She was standing right in front of me. She looked relieved.
Did she say anything to you this time?
She looked me in the eyes and said, "Thank you for finding me." Then she suddenly looked over my shoulder. Her face changed. She looked terrified. She whispered, "Be careful. The person who killed me knows you were the one who found me. He's looking for you now."
That's enough to keep you looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, I've been on edge all day. I keep getting this overwhelming feeling that someone is watching me. At the gym, at work, and even at my own apartment. Every time I turn around, there's nobody there.
You make sure to stay safe out there. Thanks for telling your story.
Thanks for listening.
Some stories end with answers. Others end with warnings. Whether those dreams were coincidence, intuition, or something we'll never understand, that's for each of us to decide. Now, let's go to our next caller. You're on the air. You said you used to work for an old roadside gas station. I bet you've seen some things.
I guess you could say that. I'd been debating calling in for a while because every time I tell this story, people either laugh or they tell me I must have been tired or mistaken.
Well, those are usually the stories that interest us the most. What happened?
This happened about 2 years ago. I was working the overnight shift at a gas station right off an old highway. It wasn't a big chain or anything. Just one of those small stations you find when you're driving through the mountains. You get a kind 2 gas pumps out front, a tiny convenience store, a coffee machine that's probably older than me, and one of those old signs that a few of the letters don't even light up anymore.
Sounds like a pretty lonely place.
Yeah, especially after midnight. During the day, people stop for gas and snacks, but at night, you could go hours without seeing another car. I went through whole shifts, sometimes only seeing 1 or 2 people come through. The station was surrounded by woods and there was maybe one house within a mile, but I actually kind of liked working nights. I'd bring a book, drink coffee, or just doom scroll until it was time to clock out. But one night, someone walked in who I'll never forget.
Okay, let's hear it.
It was around 2:30 in the morning. I remember because I had just checked the clock and was thinking, my God, this night couldn't move any slower. All of a sudden the bell rang and that's when the door opened and this guy walked in.
Seems pretty normal so far.
Yeah, but he wasn't normal. The first thing I noticed was his clothes. He looked like he walked straight out of an old Western movie, but it didn't look like a Halloween costume. He was wearing an old brown leather jacket, a button-up shirt, jeans, boots, and this wide-brimmed cowboy hat, and he had a revolver on his hip. Which isn't too weird. A lot of people in the area wear guns on their hips, but his looked old, like one my grandpa had that he told me was passed down from his grandfather. But anyways, he had a weathered face, like someone who spent years working outside, maybe late 40s, early 50s. And the weirdest part was he looked completely calm.
Did he say anything to you?
Yeah, he did. And he just looked at me and asked, "How far is Black Hollow from here?"
Black Hollow?
Yeah, I was seriously confused. And immediately I knew something was off. I've lived in that area my whole life. There's no Black Hollow. There's not even a road named that. So I said, "I'm sorry, sir. I've never heard of it. Are you sure that's the right name?" And he kind of smirked, not like he thought I was wrong, more like he thought I was joking.
What did he say next?
He said, "Sure you have." And he leaned forward a little and said, "It used to be about 10 miles down this road." I told him, "No, sir. There's nothing down that road except the old logging area, and the next town over is called Mineral City." And that's when his expression changed.
How so?
He just looked confused. Not angry, just confused, like he came to or something. Or like I had just told him something impossible, maybe. He looked out the front windows at the highway and said, "The road changed." I laughed a little because I thought maybe he was just lost. I said, "A lot of roads change. What year were you last through here?" And he looked at me and he said, 1878.
1878?
Yeah, I remember laughing because I thought he was messing with me. I said, "Well, you're about 140 years late." And he didn't laugh, he just stared at me. Then he asked, "Did they burn it down?" I asked, "Burn what down?" And he said, "The town."
So he genuinely believed there was a town there?
Yeah, he started describing it. He said there used to be a bar and a little general store, a church with a white steeple. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's confused. Maybe he has dementia. Maybe he's having some kind of episode. So I asked him, "Sir, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?"
What happened after that?
He looked like he was starting to panic, like he didn't know where he was. He said, "No, I just need to get home." Then he looked around the store and said something that still gives me chills. He said, "This place feels wrong."
Why?
I asked him what he meant, and he said, "It's too bright." Then he looked up at the lights, and he said, "Everything looks different."
That's creepy.
Yeah, but the thing is, he wasn't acting scary. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't trying to trick me. He seemed genuinely confused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out some coins. And that was another weird thing. These coins looked old, like really old. I didn't really recognize what they were. He just sat them on the counter and thanked me for the help. I tried to tell him that wasn't necessary. He hadn't bought anything.
Did you take the money?
No, I felt bad for him. He looked so confused. I said, "Sir, if you're looking for Black Hollow, I can help you find where you need to go." And I grabbed my phone to pull up a map. I looked down for maybe 3 seconds. I typed in Black Hollow. Nothing came up. I looked back up, and he was gone.
Gone?
Gone. The front door never opened. The bell never rang. He wasn't in the bathroom. He wasn't anywhere. I ran outside because I thought maybe he walked out while I was looking at my phone. Nothing. No footsteps. No car. No headlights. Nothing.
Did you ever find anything about Black Hollow?
I did, and that's why I'm calling. I couldn't let it go. A few days later, I went to the library and started looking through old records. And I found something. There was a small settlement in that area called Black Hollow. It wasn't on modern maps because it basically disappeared.
How do you mean disappeared?
There was a huge fire that burnt the town to the ground, killing at least 20 people. They didn't even bother attempting to rebuild. Too expensive. The weirdest part is the year it burnt down. 1878.
That just gave me chills.
I know. And there's one more thing. I found some old photos from that town. It was a picture of people standing outside the general store. And in the back of the picture was a man wearing the exact same hat.
You're saying you saw someone who may have been from a town that no longer existed?
I don't know what I saw. I'm not saying he was a ghost. Maybe there's another explanation. But I know what I saw. I know that man walked into my gas station. I know he was looking for a place that hasn't existed in almost 150 years. He did leave behind one thing, though.
What was that?
Those coins he tried to pay me with for helping him.
Thank you for sharing that. And to everyone listening tonight. If you're driving down an old highway and someone asks you for directions to a town you've never heard of, maybe check the map twice. Because sometimes places don't disappear. Sometimes they just wait for someone to find them again. We have another story that comes from a listener who asked to remain anonymous. They say this happened in the fall of 2020 while driving home with their father through the mountains of western Montana. They wrote, "I've tried convincing myself there has to be a logical explanation, but every time I remember the details, I come to the same conclusion. I can't explain any of it." Here is their story. My dad and I have always loved being outdoors. Every October we'd spend a weekend camping and hunting in the mountains, even if we rarely came home with anything. It was more about spending time together than filling the freezer. That weekend had been uneventful. We packed up camp later than planned, and by the time we started driving home, it was close to 11 at night. The roads were completely empty. No houses, no gas stations, no traffic. Just miles of forest illuminated by our headlights. About halfway home, Dad pointed toward a ridge overlooking the highway. "Do you see that?" Hovering above the trees were 3 bright white lights. At first I assumed they were helicopters, but they weren't blinking and they weren't making any sound. They simply hovered in place. We pulled onto the shoulder to watch. For nearly a minute, nothing happened. Then all three lights began moving together in perfect formation, not weaving or drifting like aircraft, perfectly synchronized. One suddenly shot several hundred feet sideways without accelerating. It simply appeared somewhere else. Dad looked at me and quietly said, "Nothing flies like that." He spent years working around military aircraft, and I'd never heard uncertainty in his voice before. Then our truck died. The engine shut off instantly. The headlights stayed on, but the dashboard went dark and the radio fell silent. Dad tried restarting it 3 or 4 times. Nothing. That's when we noticed something strange. The woods had gone completely quiet. No wind, no crickets, no distant animals. It was like someone had muted the entire mountain. The 3 lights slowly drifted toward the road until they stopped over a nearby field. I'd guess they were less than a quarter mile away. Suddenly, my ears started ringing. Not painfully, just enough that it drowned out everything else. Dad rubbed his temples and asked if I heard it too. Before I could answer, every electronic display inside the truck flickered back on. The dashboard clock reset itself, 12 o'clock. Then everything shut off again. The lights outside remained perfectly still. Neither of us wanted to admit we were scared, but we both were. After what felt like several minutes, the lights shot straight upward and disappeared into the night. The instant they vanished, the truck started on its own. Dad's hands weren't even on the key. The engine simply roared to life. Neither of us said a word for the rest of the drive. When we finally got home, my mom was standing in the driveway. She looked angry. She asked where we'd been. Dad laughed and said we'd just gotten back from camp. She told us we'd been gone almost 3 hours longer than expected. Neither of us believed her until we checked our phones. The timestamps didn't make sense. Based on when we'd left camp, we should have been home around midnight. Instead, it was almost 3 in the morning. Neither of us could account for those missing hours. We remembered stopping to watch the lights. We remembered the truck stalling, but together, those events couldn't have lasted more than 15 minutes. The next morning, Dad walked outside to unload the truck. He called my name. There, on the hood, was a perfectly round patch where the paint had disappeared. The metal underneath wasn't burned or scratched. It looked as if the paint had simply never existed. A body shop couldn't explain it, and neither could the insurance company. We eventually traded the truck in. For years, we avoided talking about that night. Then last Christmas, my dad admitted something he'd never told me. While the truck was stalled, he hadn't been watching the lights. He'd been watching me. He said that for about 30 seconds, I was looking out the windshield with a huge smile on my face. Then, without moving my lips, I quietly whispered, "They're finally here." He asked me later why I'd said that. The problem is, I have absolutely no memory of saying those words. I've asked him several times over the years if he's sure. He never changes his answer. To this day, whenever we drive through the mountains at night, we both find ourselves looking toward the ridgelines. Not because we're hoping to see those lights again, because deep down, we're afraid they might still be watching us. And if they are, I can't help wondering what happened during those missing hours that neither of us can remember. All right, listeners, the phone line is lighting up, so now we're going to another caller story. You're live. Tell us your story.
Hi, my name's Sarah. I've got a story that's never sat right with me, and I still think about it every time someone talks about guardian angels. About 4 years ago, I moved into my first apartment after college. I didn't know anyone in the city, so when I met the older woman across the hall, I felt like I'd lucked out. Her name was Evelyn. She had to be in her late 70s, always wore knitted cardigans, and somehow always seemed to know when I was having a rough day. She'd leave little bags of homemade cookies outside my door, ask how work was going, and we'd spend evenings talking in the hallway. She told me she'd lived in that building for over 40 years. One Monday morning, I was running late for work. I grabbed my bag, locked my apartment, and headed toward the bus stop. As I stepped out of the building, Evelyn was standing on the sidewalk. She smiled, but she looked concerned. She said, "Don't catch your usual bus today."
That's very ominous.
Yeah, I thought the same. I laughed and asked if she knew something I didn't. She shook her head and simply said, "The next one will get you there just fine." I don't know why, but I listened. I walked right past the stop and waited for the following bus instead. About 10 minutes later, sirens started flying past us. When my bus reached the next intersection, traffic had completely stopped. My usual bus had been hit broadside by a dump truck that had run a red light. The front half of the bus was crushed. Several passengers were seriously injured, and 2 people lost their lives. I remember sitting there frozen because I always sat near the front, exactly where the truck had struck. The first thing I wanted to do after work was thank Evelyn. When I got home, I knocked on her apartment door. No answer.
Maybe she just wasn't home.
Well, I thought that at first too. Then a maintenance worker walked by and asked if I needed help. I told him I was looking for Evelyn from across the hall. He looked confused. Then he said, "Apartment 4C? Nobody's lived there in years."
Wow.
I laughed because I'd been talking to her for months. He disappeared into the leasing office and came back with an old tenant photo hanging in a retirement display they kept for longtime residents. There she was. The same smile, the same cardigan. The caption underneath said she had passed away nearly 9 years earlier after living in the building for 43 years. I just stood there, staring at the picture. I never saw Evelyn again, but every Monday morning when I leave for work, I still glance toward the sidewalk where she was standing, and for reasons I can't explain, I never take the first bus anymore.
Sarah, whether she was a guardian angel, a ghost, or simply someone who wasn't finished looking after her neighbors, I'm glad you listened. Thank you for sharing your story with us tonight. Thanks for joining us tonight. Wherever you are, drive safe, sleep lightly, and if you have a story the world wouldn't believe, we'll be here to listen. Good night.